Hello, let's talk about some vocab. So what we are working for right now is Key Concept 1.2. So on Key Concept 1.2, that's right here, we are going to have our vocab test coming up pretty soon. The Neolithic Revolution and Early Agricultural Societies. So let's start this by looking at the word Neolithic. So I'm just on Google right now and I put in Neolithic and we see a lot of the pictures that come here with the word Neolithic. And what I first noticed about all these pictures is what's really important is this is farming. This is really the first time that farming happens, both with raising crops and also having animals that are domesticated, that are now living next to people. They're not necessarily hunting them, they're raising them now. So when you talk about Neolithic Revolution, this is the big change where people are going from hunters and gatherers to living settled lives as farmers, meaning they're both raising their own crops and also they are raising animals. So if we look at why is this significant? Why is this Neolithic Revolution where people start farming so significant? We got to go back to the Paleolithic Revolution, which we talked about earlier. Paleolithic Revolution is the tools that were made. Tools that allowed humans to hunt, allowed humans that could be hunters and gatherers, more advanced than other animals. That's the Paleolithic Revolution. The Neolithic Revolution is basically someone deciding, I'm going to plant a seed in the ground, water it, and wait for it to grow. Or instead of, hunting all these animals, I'm going to capture some of them, put them inside of a fence, and raise them, like sheep, for example. So if we look here you see the Neolithic river civilizations. Oh, Neolithic river civilizations. So our first human societies were Neolithic societies, which means that they were farming. And that means the majority of them start on rivers. The majority of them start on rivers. That's where the Neolithic Revolution happens for the most part. It happens there, waters flood, they're able to grow crops, they're able to hunt, and that's how these civilizations begin. And that's what the Neolithic Revolution is. There's going to be a multiple choice question on the AP exam. There's a decent chance that it'll be about the Neolithic Revolution or some historical expert talking about the Neolithic Revolution. You have to answer questions about it. So this is the transition going from hunters and gatherers to farmers in the Neolithic Revolution. Our next word on our list is patriarchy. So if you look at again your list, you got word number 2 there. We are at patriarchy right there. So let's take a look at this word, what it really means. I got a picture there, and patriarchy pretty much means that the males have more power, or the males are in dominant positions in civilization. Patriarchy, where does it start in history? It basically starts with the Neolithic Revolution. After the Neolithic Revolution, there is basically patriarchy, which means that males start rising to more positions of power. Now, men having more power than women, this will continue in world history until, what time is it? Yeah, like now. It pretty much is still going on right now. We are still, most of us live in patriarchal societies where men have more power. Hunters and gatherers, we talked about before, were more egalitarian. There was more equality between men and women in societies, ancient societies, all the way up in history. This is going to be a reoccurring theme, that there's patriarchy or that males have more power. This is with kings when we get to empires, emperors, all the way up until today. I mean, I'll give you a modern example. We have an election right now where we might have our first female president. And I believe she'd be number 45. So we've had 44 men before, we've had a female president possibly. So patriarchy pretty much means rule by the men. Men have more power. Sorry about that. Men have more power than women in the civilization. And that is the word patriarchy. Let me add one more thing to that real quick. All the Neolithic river civilizations, from what we know, were more patriarchal societies, and this will occur in all of history pretty much until the modern era. We will see more in modern times, like in the 1900s and 2000s, more women fighting for equality, but it still doesn't exist today. Our next word that we are going to look at on your sheet is number 3, domestication. Domestication pretty much means making something from wild to under human control. So domestication could include animals, for example. There were wild animals, and we've been able to domesticate many animals. A lot of this are the farm animals that we have today. And this happened during the Neolithic Revolution when we moved from being hunters and gatherers to farmers. We domesticated animals, and animals like cows could be domesticated, sheep, pigs could be domesticated. They could be kept, enclosed in a fence, and they could be raised, and basically instead of us hunting an animal, why don't we feed it, get it all nice and fat, and we can kill it and eat it. That is pretty much a large purpose for domestication. Except for dogs. Dogs, we weren't really interested in eating dogs, but dogs became man's best friend because they could be used to help in hunts and other things. In fact, if we take a look at a chart here, we have the domestication of dogs, and dogs originally come from wolves. And you can see here that all the different breeds of dogs that we have today have a common ancestor. That is the wolf. What happened was there were people who saw that, wolves used to attack human populations, and people eventually saw that, if they could capture some of these little bit nicer wolves, they could breed them and could start changing them a little bit to eventually they became the dogs that we had. They would use them for hunting. They would use them, for protection against wolves. And eventually what happens is, and this is over, thousands of years, we have all the different breeds of dogs that we have today. But they have a common ancestor, which is the wolf. So domestication pretty much means is taking an animal that was wild and making it tame, making it under your control. I said animal there, but it also can go for plants as well. We domesticate plants, like rice, like wheat. Any plant that we can, grow and we can farm, we've pretty much domesticated that plant. We've changed those plants over years to try to make them bigger, produce more food, and this happens with plants where we just, we eventually, you got to figure the first person to plant that seed in the ground and wait for it and then grow it and eat it, that's one of the most genius inventions ever in human history that they came up with that. But what happened is we crossbreed plants and we try to get plants that are bigger. Corn could be an example of this. The very first corn that was in Mexico was extremely small and you couldn't eat it. But eventually what the people in the region of Mexico did was they were able to domesticate that plant, grow with other ones, and the corn eventually became larger. And now today we think of corn as being a pretty big thing, and it's grown all over the world. So again, domestication, it is very significant because what this will mean is we go from our Neolithic river civilizations, which are the first ones to really domesticate plants and animals, and eventually that will spread all over the world. So we'll have domestication happen in these Neolithic river civilizations with animals and plants, and eventually that idea will spread over the world, and basically our civilizations, we beat the hunters and gatherers after a while, because there are some hunters and gatherers, but not too many of them left. All right, number 4, let's talk about pastoralism. Now, pastoralism, it's not being a hunter-gatherer, but it's also not farming. So if you look at this, you look at pastoralism, what do we see here? People with animals, but not wild animals, they're moving around with animals. So people who are pastoral are nomadic or semi-nomadic, meaning that they move around from place to place with their animals. And they use the animals for milk, they use the animals for clothing, for food, but basically they're not like living a civilization in one place. So pastoral people aren't really like these Neolithic river civilizations. They're not like living in one place. They're moving around. They might move around this area in a cycle. They might move back and forth with their animals. But they're also not hunters and gatherers because they're not just gathering or hunting. They actually move around with animals and they depend on these animals. So they domesticate their animals if you're pastoral people. But they live with them and they're dependent upon them. So they're nomadic, meaning that they move from place to place, mostly nomadic people. They don't live in one place or in one farm. But they're not hunters and gatherers because they're not just gathering food, hunting wild animals. They're moving around with domesticated animals. Now this group might not seem like it can be very powerful, but there are some pastoral people who become extremely powerful in history. The biggest one that we'll get to eventually are the Mongols. And if you don't love the Mongols now, wait. By the end of world history, you will love you some Mongols. They were badass. All right, so these are pastoral people who are moving from place to place with their animals.